Yo, what up, dudes? What up? Today I'm going to show you how to edit your photos like Andrew Kearns and Samuel Elkins, and it's a very popular style right now. Almost everyone's doing it, and I kind of dubbed it as like hipster photography. So, yeah, let's get into it. So basically I'm using Lightroom, and then this is going to be our before photo, and this is the after. So that's kind of look we're going for. And let's dive into this mo. So we're going to reset the settings. And this is what we're using right now. This was taken at sunset, and the lighting was really nice, and I really like the backlighting. It makes a nice golden glow, but it's a very blue photo, so we're going to fix that and make it look all fancy and generic like everyone else's hipster photography, which is what I'm into. So, okay, so basically, we're going to crop the photo, and what most people are doing is they're going to crop it to a 4x5, and that is the biggest file that Lightroom, or that Instagram, if you're going to post on Instagram, will allow you to do. And as you crop it, it will do a relative crop as well, so you can only crop to that 4x8 or what, you know what I'm saying. So basically, we're going to, a very common thing to do is to position your subject right smack dab in the center of the frame, and basically on that third quadrant line right there is where I like to keep, personally, where I like to keep kind of the most important aspect of the photo, which is her eyes, obviously. You don't want her elbow in that aspect. That'd be kind of weird. So we're going to click done, and that crops it in. And basically, now I'm going to kind of warm up the photo a little bit, kind of bring in some of that nice warmth. Bring down your contrast, because that makes the skin and the outline a little bit softer. Bring down your clarity a little bit, and this is all just about softening. We're only going to do that about -5 to -10. It's kind of up to your taste. You don't want to overdo it on the negative contrast and clarity, because it's going to look really soft, like those. Yeah, you'd see. Okay, you get it. Anyway, we're going to bring down the highlights, just as mostly you can watch the sky. Generally, I don't like to bring it down too much, just because I like the blues in the sky, and I like that natural. And if you're shooting at dusk like I was, it's not going to be too overblown anyway. And if you wanted to check, you could overblow your skies, and you like hover your thing over this arrow, your cursor over this arrow, and it'll show you everything in red that's going to be overexposed. So that's how you can check your exposure. So I like to bring down my highlights just a tiny bit, specifically on these photos. We're going to bring down our shadows, kind of get that contrasty look, but without the contrast. I know, contrary to... Okay, anyway. We're going to bring down the blacks to kind of boost those darks. Whites, I might boost a little bit, because it's gonna highlight around her figure just a tiny bit, which looks nice. And we don't want to overdo it. We're just going to do it just a tiny bit, and we can kind of check what the before and after looks like. See, it already looks worlds better. Like, what the crap? We can call it done, right? No, we're not going to call it done. We're going to keep freaking work on it, so shut up. So, I might boost exposure. You can click on this exposure button over here, and you can hit your plus and minus keys to adjust your exposure very subtly. See that? That's pretty nifty. Cool. What I like to do, and I know it's very common, a lot of people kind of either drop their saturation or drop their vibrance. I do it very slightly on the saturation, just to desaturate those colors so they don't look unnatural. And then vibrance, we're going to bring that up. I usually crank that up quite a bit, just because it looks nice to me. I like colorful photos. A lot of people do very kind of very dry edits. They'll look very desaturated and stuff like that, and that's fine if that's what they want. Personally, I like to bump up my vibrance, which kind of messes with skin tones too, so you have to be a little bit more careful. I'll probably bring a little bit more warmth into it. And for now, that's going to look good. We might go back to that later, but let's just work with that. Now, we're going to go down to curves, which is arguably the most important thing you'll ever use. And we're going to use a typical S-curve, and I add 3 spots. And first thing I do is drop my darks way down, right? And then I'm going to bump up, and this is called clipping, apparently. I don't know the terminology of it, but once again, very common technique. But what essentially this is doing is taking your blacks and making them gray, and kind of smoothing them out a little bit. And that's my girlfriend at the window. And so, anyway, we're gonna kind of clip the blacks. The middle one's gonna kind of mess around with your mid-tones, and then the top one up here is gonna be your highlights a little bit. And so you can see what it's doing. It's blowing out those highlights. So we're gonna bring that up just a tiny bit. And what I've noticed is that top one adds a little bit of contrast. And then this very tip-top one is clipping your highlights. It's kind of like the blacks. It's the opposite of the blacks. It's the whites. And I never like my whites to be true white, so I'm going to pull them down a little bit. And this is also smoothing. Okay, you get it. They're smoothing out the whites. We're gonna pull up the blacks just a tiny bit more because that's super contrasty, and we're gonna pull that up. So see the difference with that black? I love that's clipped blacks. That's true black, and that is clipped, and it softens everything. So here's the before and after with the curves. Look at that. Crap. Not so crap. Pretty nice. But it is a little too dark for me in the blacks, so we're going to pull this back up just a tiny bit. Just a tids bit. Maybe a little bit more. Pull up the shadows. Okay. Yeah, that's looking pretty good so far. Another thing is the tint. I don't really mess with that. I forgot to go over that. You can add it more green or more magenta. We're going to leave it just about in the center. Maybe just a tiny bit more green. That can really mess with the overall color of your photo and give it kind of weird tinges, which you don't want unless that's what you're going for. I don't know. Whatever floats your boat. So just, okay, we'll move on. Another thing that's very common is putting some blues into your shadows. This can give it more of like a calming look. You can do this with red channel. You can do this with green channel, but we'll kind of focus just on blues. So we're going to make another S curve, and see what that's doing is if you drop the blues out, it's going to add more green. So we're going to kind of leave that dot right there. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to bring more blues into the shadows by pulling up this little diddly right here. See what that's doing in the shadows over here? You can very vaguely see it, but it's adding a definite difference to it. So yeah, that's going to kind of change your ball game a little bit in your shadows, right? We can bump up the blues in the midtones, but that'll make it look definitely more cold, which I want more warm looking photos, so I might even pull just a tiny bit out. Let's check the highlights. We'll kind of pull those down just a tiny bit. And this is just checking your clipping on the blues. I generally don't mess with that at all. Mainly the thing we're going to be focusing on is the shadow right here. And right now there's even just a tidbit too much. So I think that right there looks pretty good. We can go into the greens. And to me, the whole photo looks a little too green. So we're going to add 3 dots. And we'll kind of pull some greens out of the midtones. Because see how her skin over here is looking pretty green? We can kind of pull that out, which is interesting. You can really screw up your photo on this, I've noticed, if you're not careful. Pulling out green is going to leave more blue and red. Obviously, your photo is probably going to look a little bit more red. And once again, that's adding more green to the shadows if we're messing with that curve. Holy freak, what is going on? Okay. Stop. Okay. I think we're good. So far, that looks really nice. Let's do before and after. That's before. That is after. To me, that's looking a lot better. I'm happy with that, and we could almost call it good, you could say, but no, we're going to keep going. So down to the HSL color palette, we're going to mess with some more colors. The cool thing about this tool is you can click on this little diddly right here and use the scrolling on your mouse to adjust your colors, which is super nifty, okay? So we're going to go with hue first, and generally what most people do in this type of line of work in hipster photography is they pull their greens way down so they're almost an orangish yellow, which is, it looks good, over green like that kind of looks meh. I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of partial to either, but for this sake we'll go down, and it gives it more like a rustic kind of folksy feel. I guess you could call this, instead of hipster photography, because that's kind of mean, you could call it folk photography, right? So you can pull those down. You can saturate, or you can change the hue of the skin. If it's more red, you can make it more orange yellow, but be careful, they're going to start looking like mac and cheese. So you don't want that. That's looking pretty good right now. So let's just leave that as is. You can mess with all your blues and stuff if you want. It doesn't really matter, right? For now, I'm going to leave it like that. Let's do a before and after. So see how that just barely changes those greens up in this area. That looks nicer to me. All right, now we're going to go to saturation. And I don't typically mess with this too much because desaturating makes it look dull to me. You can kind of pull the saturation down on the greens if you wanted, but I like leaving them right where they're at. This is especially useful if you have very red or orange skin tones. You can sit and desaturate the crap out of them. But like I said, I like leaving them a little bit more vibrant, just kind of my style. And I've noticed like Andrew Kearns and Sam Elkins kind of leave it a little bit more desaturated. I know I said I was going to edit like them, but screw it. We're just going to kind of go with what I want. Along those same lines, though. Luminance is very nice. Typically, I use this for the sky. So the sky is a little bright, right? You kind of want your background to be almost the same exposure as your foreground, or else your foreground kind of gets washed out. That's just what I kind of go by. So we can pull that down, and the luminance is just messing with the luminance. Duh. And also you can change the hue of your sky, which I like to do. You can definitely, oh, nope, don't like that. Never mind. We can pull the blues down and completely change them. I don't know, it's kind of hit and miss with each photo. So we'll try some saturation. We'll desaturate the sky a little bit. That's looking pretty good. That's just pulling it down just ever so slightly. We're going to pull that down a little bit more. I kind of like it where you can see more of the sky. I just think it makes it look more homely, you know? Let's see. Let's pull that hue a little bit more true blue. And that looks more like broad daylight. So maybe we'll change it to that. We'll bring down the saturation a little bit more. That looks pretty good to me. This is before and after. So that's before. See the drastic difference in your tones. That looks mucho better. We'll go back to the luminance, see if we can brighten up her face just a tiny bit, which is going to pull up the oranges and reds. This can be a little bit sketch. I don't know if I like that. Let's see. We want to be very careful with it. Very subtle. The key is subtle. You don't want it to be over the freaking top, or else you're going to have a smorgasbord of crap. You can mess around with the color tab as well. This is where you can get specific red colors. You can change your reds. Look at her face now. It's all bright and rosy, yellow, sickly. I typically like to leave it on the reds, especially right there. You can bring them up just a tiny bit, and that's going to brighten her up just a little bit, which doesn't look bad. So we're going to leave the luminance up. Orange, you get the idea. It's pretty self-explanatory. Most of this I'm just going to leave as is. The yellows, though, are the greens. See in the background over here, specifically? If we pull that down, that kind of darkens those a little bit, and we can desaturate those, and that makes it not stand out as much. But it also kind of dulls your photos. It's give and take. You can bring the luminance down, stuff like that. Actually, I'm going to go back and bring down the red, just because she kind of looks fake and looks weird. So you can mess around with all those colors, but for now I'm going to leave with that. Coming down to the split toning, I really like to add in the highlights a little bit of warmth, and most people do as well. That kind of just makes it look like summer. It's the best way I can describe it. And shadows, blue would look kind of cool. Your saturation is going to mess with all the saturation of that color, specifically in the shadows, right? So you got to be a little bit careful, and this is your balance. You can lean it a little bit more towards the shadow end, which is on the left end, which is going to bring more blue in, or you can bring it to the right end, which is going to add a little bit more warmth on the highlights. Whatever you set your colors at in the shadows and the highlights is going to poke through on that balance. Typically, leaving it almost dead center is going to be pretty good, maybe a little bit on the warm side. Let's see what shadows look like with a little bit of warmth. See how that drastically changes the feeling of your photo? I like to leave it a little bit blue in the shadows. To me, that looks a little bit more natural, and I've noticed that a lot of popular photographers these days are doing that same idea. This is before and after total. Look at that. Look at that. Wow. Wow. Hipsters. Okay. I like to sharpen. I know a lot of people probably don't, but sharpening to me looks really nice. You get a lot of that. It just brings back the tone. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Okay. This is before and after. That's before. You can't really even see a difference, but I typically like to bring it in. Not that much. I usually bring it up to like 35 to 40. So that's looking real nice. I don't really mess with noise reduction. I do remove the chromatic aberration, which is on they're probably not there in this photo just because it's not really harsh sunlight, but you'll get these like blue, purple, or green tinges that kind of poke out on your edges sometimes, and that can eliminate them, and you can go into the manual mode and actually mess with them manually, which is kind of cool, but I don't think we really have them right now, which is nice. Maybe in the hair, but I doubt it. So we're looking pretty good there. Profile corrections fixes any lens distortions you may have, and vignetting, specifically with full frame cameras with a full frame lens. This is going to have a problem. This is with it on, with it off. And I typically like leaving it off. I like that natural look. The distortion isn't too bad for me. A lot of the primes you might have problems with if you're shooting with like a 50 on a crop sensor. You might like get some weird distortion like barrel. And same with my lens. I know I would. But for this photo, we're going to leave it. And you can actually bring in more vignette if you wanted. The least noticeable, the better, though. So you got to be careful with that. But I know a lot of people do that, and that brings the center focus to the center of the frame. I always put in a little bit of grain just because hipster, why not? You know, it's supposed to, you're mimicking film. That's the whole point of this, is a lot of photography nowadays is trying to mimic film. And not most people, a lot of people will actually shoot on film just to get actual film. I might bring up my vibrance a little bit. And now her face is looking a little bit dark for me, so you can come up to this brush right here. We can warm it up and bring up, actually we'll go to dodge lighten. You can add in your warmth. These are the individual brush settings over here. And we're going to ever so slightly bring in a little bit of warmth to her face. That is way too much exposure. And we can actually warm it up a little bit more. So yeah, and then we'll bring that to her forearms just a tiny bit so she kind of matches. Still might be just tidbit too much. Actually, I don't know. We'll try the plus and minus. That's the whole exposure. You don't want to do that. That's exposure for the whole thing. You know, that looks pretty good, I think. I like that. Here's the before. That's before. See how dark her face is? That's after. So that's just adding a tiny bit in. I think that looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and click done. And she's got this big zit right here. So we're going to go in with our tool, which is this thing, and this is just basically like if you use Photoshop, it will sample from other skin that is similar to that and then paste it over. That looks pretty good to me. So, and now you just do final touches on it. You can mess around with your reds, pulling reds out to see what happens. That's a little bit more blue. Actually, red looks pretty good, minusing. Generally, what most people are going to do, though, what they're focusing on is just kind of clipping the shadows and the highlights and giving it a very rustic, folky feel is what I've noticed a lot of people do. Now it's too blue, so F that. We're going to go back to normal and bring in a little bit of red. Here is the before and after photo. So that's looking pretty good to me. Still a little bit green. So we can come back into the blues and add some more in. That's too much, Aaron. And pull some, we might leave a little bit in. And I think for right now, as a very quick edit, that might be good. If I mess with it any longer, I'm just going to keep editing for hours and hours and never get it right. For me, pull down the saturation. Screw that. And so, yeah, I think hit F to view it full frame. And that's what we're dealing with. And that is the final product. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my Instagram. Everything will be linked below in the comments. Or not in the comments. In the bio. The bio thing. Whatever. Cool. And hopefully I'll be doing more videos soon. Tell me what you like, what you didn't like. And peace and love, my brothers and sisters. Goodbye.